I do not know of anyone who has actually tried to look at this problem in its full extent, because in a sense it makes all of the empirical attempt questionable. Whether you take the econometric tests for equilibrium prices, they assume that the data we get are equilibrium prices, for demand and supply in individual markets. All of the data assumes that we have, am I running short? 14 left. Good. All of the data assumes that we have this, so we can't rely on that. You take macroeconomics. The difficulty with macroeconomics is that it assumes the whole economy gets to an equilibrium. So the problem with doing macroeconomics is that when you take the aggregate GDP, investment, consumption data in any given period, it only makes sense if you assume that all the consumers have reached full equilibrium within that time period, within the time period that the data is being collected. If that is not so, then how do you interpret the data? I tried, one of the things I do to earn a living is to teach something called computable general equilibrium modeling. So we have small models of our economy, 3-sector, 5-sector, 8-sector, and we compute the equilibrium in these economies. So I decided to play around and I changed the speed of convergence in the different sectors. I made some sectors go much faster to equilibrium than other sectors. And lo and behold, pretty soon I had chaos in my model. Things that were converging before stopped converging afterwards. So once you remove the assumption that all these sectors are in fact equilibrium sectors and that they reach equilibria in the same time periods, we have no reason to assume that the data that we get are what our theory tells us the data should be. So what problem does this pose for us, and how does it relate to Austrian economics? There's been a long-standing argument, I gather, between people like Mises, who believe in equilibrium modeling, and others like Lachman and Shackle, who believe that you cannot have any useful equilibrium modeling because the equilibrium is constantly changing. I don't quite take a stand on either of the two. My stand is simply to say that even if there is an equilibrium, it is simply never reached in time for us to know what it is. The data simply will not tell us that, and therefore we have to accept agnosticism from this point. So the practical problem posed for those of us who wish to be informed about actual economic modeling is to say the following, and I will make one quick remark about the nature of the data, and then just give a sort of a personal reminiscence about the problems I've had in trying to summarize or to investigate this issue. The assumption normally made is that, equilibrium is quick, so even if you don't actually reach it, you'll be very close to equilibrium. So therefore, it's a good approximation. There is one real problem with that assumption. If this is the equilibrium point, and if you're going right down there and says, you're quick, so you're almost there, you're close to the equilibrium. If that were always true, that would be fine. The problem is, we don't know whether the path to equilibrium, and this is the price, and this is the equilibrium price, we don't know that the path is monotonic. The path may not be like this. The path may be like this all the way, and then hit it. Well, if the path is not monotonic, and there are many, many models that deal with what is called complexity theory or chaotic dynamics, which show that equilibrium paths can look like that. If the path is not monotonic, it doesn't help you to say that equilibrium is quick, because it is quick and oscillating. So you simply do not know if you're near the equilibrium. That's the last theoretical point I want to mention. Let me just reminisce a little bit about the difficulty in trying to verify this. I thought, if I could get individual prices, narrowly defined goods, okay, brown eggs from Rhode Island chickens. I said, okay, if I can get the prices all across the United States for these goods, and if I could compute how fast the prices of these commodities equilibrate across the United States, then I would have some idea of the speed of convergence. So I wrote to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and I tried to get the data. Well, the practical problem is they code their data in such a way that you need to spend 8 months looking at their data before you can use it. So they said to me, do you have a graduate student who needs the job? Because you probably don't want to come and spend 8 months looking at all our procedures. Secondly, you have to sign a confidentiality agreement before they will let you look at the data. Thirdly, they do not actually give you anything that is not an aggregate. Even the most detailed data they have has some level of aggregation, enough to spoil what I wanted to do. So let's step back a little bit and ask ourselves, what do we want? We're talking about having an informed public. And to have an informed public, which means that we want to get information about a private enterprise economy for an informed public. Now, the basic conundrum here is that if you want information about a private enterprise economy, who will credibly give you this information? And if you could credibly acquire such information from somebody, who would credibly store it and transmit it? And once you see the complications arising over here, you will see immediately that nobody will credibly give you this information unless they have complete anonymity and promise of anonymity. Therefore, the data that you can collect will always be stored away in some government bureaucracy and can never be brought to light, at least several years later, after you have gone through all the bureaucratic hoops in order to get permission to get the data. So therefore, nobody or no public can hope to be currently informed. So given that the public cannot hope to be currently informed, and even if it were, for a number of reasons, we cannot believe the data. I want to go back to the Austrian conclusions, but since I have been studying the history of economics for a long time, I want to mention somebody who is not talked about very often, Dougald Stewart. Dougald Stewart was the successor of Adam Smith at the professorship of moral philosophy, and in many ways he was actually a critic of Adam Smith, not so much a follower of Adam Smith. Now, Dougald Stewart argued that when we want to theorize and we want to know the causes of things, he says to know the causes of things means we have to know the motives which make people act the way they do. Somehow we have lost our idea of the sense of causation as being fundamentally a reference to the minds of people. Probably because Dougald Stewart had this point of view, he also quoted approvingly, I think it was by William Cullen, the famous chemist. And the dictum that Cullen used to say is that there are more false facts than there are false theories. So with that, I would like to leave you.